Welcome, everyone. I'm Lynn Woodland, and tonight is part of an ongoing Forward to the Future series I've been hosting with the technology developer and visionary Bryant Cruse, all about some of the positive potential of technology. Because as our technology, AI in particular, becomes increasingly sophisticated, there's a growing fear of a future where technology just gets completely out of our control and develops the capacity to dominate humanity. We live in an era where just a handful of big tech companies dominate the tech scene. They're funneling billions and billions of dollars into creating more and more elaborate forms of AI that require increasingly big supercomputers, making them less and less sustainable, both financially and environmentally, and resulting in these algorithms that are no longer even under the control of their makers. This is the big fear. And as we keep going in that direction, what kind of havoc might we wreak? There's a really chilling documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Very well done. I recommend it. And it lays out just how bad it already is. But tonight is kind of the good news. The reason I've devoted so much of my time to this technology series, which is way over my pay grade and not really my wheelhouse, is because I see the ways that big tech is wreaking some havoc. But I believe there's an antidote in sight in the form of this small and still relatively unknown company that for about 16 years has been working quietly with a small staff to create a technology so completely different from anything that big tech has ever even dreamed, that I firmly believe that it will become humanity's big solution in any number of ways. Now, unlike big tech, this technology is small and sustainable. It's really quite elegant. It doesn't rely on algorithms. There's nothing to it that can get out of control of its makers. And whereas bias is a very controversial part of current AI, it's, essentially there is no AI that is unbiased at this time, except this one. This technology is intrinsically bias-free. It's part of its very makeup. And the most unique thing about it is that it's actually capable of true language comprehension and common sense reasoning. It doesn't just use sophisticated word splicing to mimic comprehension, which can get very sophisticated. It can make you think, wow, this chatbot really understands what I'm saying, until it doesn't. And the type of comprehension that this very new technology has is something that all world-leading AI experts say is at least 50 or more years away, if it's possible at all. And tonight we're going to take a look at what this new technology is and how it might impact our human future. It's from the company New Sapiens. And Bryant Cruse, one of our speakers tonight, is the creator of this technology. I want to tell you a little bit about our speakers. Bryant's been a pioneer in the application of advanced automation software technology to difficult real-world problems for more than 30 years. His education includes a BA from St. John's College in Annapolis, which is a really unique approach to learning for anyone who's familiar with it. And he also has an MS in Space Systems Engineering from Johns Hopkins. And after he served for 8 years as a naval aviator, he joined the mission operations team for the Hubble telescope before it was launched, the yet launched. And from there, he went on to found 2 different successful high-tech software automation companies, both of which were ultimately acquired by public corporations. And now his third and latest company, New Sapiens, was founded in 2014. And the patented technology that comprises New Sapiens, what they call a cognitive core, that's what really is the knowledge and the comprehension inside a machine. It's been more than 15 years in development. And as I said, it is the world's first and only technology capable of language comprehension and common sense reasoning. Now, I'm excited that tonight we not only have Bryant here, but we're also joined by the physicist, Dr. William F. Bandy, Ph.D., who is, thanks, Bill, who is a longtime advisor for New Sapiens and longtime board member as well. And Bill worked at DARPA in the mid-'80s, which was a time when advances in computing just gave impetus to a whole new branch of computer science, artificial intelligence, what we're about tonight. And after a 30-year government career with NSA and DARPA, Bill co-founded Matrix Technology Systems Incorporated. I hardly can pronounce all this, it's over my head, but it was for the development and production of low-cost, high-performance radio frequency identification, tag technology and product. If any of you know what that is, you're better than me. Matrix was bought out in 2004 by another company, Symbol Technologies Incorporated, for $230 million. And Bill's name appears on well over 100 patents. So he's a guy who knows what he's talking about. I'm excited to have him with us. So, okay, enough of me. Bryant, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the New Sapiens technology and how it's different and how you were able to create something so out of the mold of a whole industry.
Thank you, Lynn. Great introduction. I always love to hear you introduce me. Makes me think, boy, I really am special. But let me clarify one thing that you said at the beginning. You said that the designers of these algorithms have lost control of them. I don't, and that's true enough. But keep in mind what's going on there is, in fact, they don't understand necessarily how they work, and that they've created something and unleashed it on the world that has unintended consequences that they can't control and that they did not expect. But don't for a minute think that the algorithms got out of control of their designers because they outsmarted them and ran off in another direction. That's not what's happening at all. These algorithms, and we've been calling them AI. I think that's really unfortunate that they're called AI in the first place. But that's typical of the history of AI, of which I've been in the field for the lion's share of its history. But people call something AI because they hope to achieve it. But when they find that it doesn't actually get there, they don't stop calling it that. So it's really called what's going on today that is called AI should be called data science, and it's a lot of statistical algorithms. But what's different about us and why we have been able to do things that others have is kind of from our approach from the very beginning. And for me, it started when I was on the Hubble Space Telescope, and I saw how we were operating spacecraft. It's kind of a science project with everybody looking at numbers. And I thought, well, I know what those numbers means, but it's really hard to keep up with. I thought, is there a way of getting my knowledge that I have in my mind? Is there a way that it can be transferred into a machine? And so we went off in a direction that, as it turns out, was not the direction that everybody else was going on. And what that was going back to 1956 when the term AI was first coined at a conference in Dartmouth. It was that AI was about emulating features of human intelligence. So the focus has always been on focusing on, can we emulate something about the brain? Can we emulate the processing architecture of the human brain? Always that focus on what's going on inside of human minds. But my approach was always, I don't know what goes on in the mind, but I know what I want. I want to get my knowledge into that machine. So I looked at knowledge as a kind of information, a model of the world. And so my question was, can I achieve the end product of human intelligence, which is knowledge, and put it in the machine, but not by emulating natural means, but by engineering means, by engineering. And recently that's been pointed out to me that that's just like a synthetic diamond is a real diamond, but not created by natural means, but by engineered means. And that has turned out to be a tremendously fruitful line of research for us. In fact, today it's beyond the research phase to production. It actually works because we're putting knowledge into the machine. Now, it turns out that that was not a simple or an easy process to do, because we had to kind of figure, well, what is knowledge and what is its relationship to the world? And we understood that it was a model, and that ideas generally meant as simpler ideas, right? And that when you communicate a new idea to somebody, you think of what you're trying to convey, and you break it into simpler ideas, and you see if there are words of those simpler ideas, and you pack those words up in a package, and you put the grammar and syntax and put it over there. And then the other person kind of unpacks that message, relates each word to an idea they already have, and puts them together in a new way to get the idea that you're trying to convey them, whatever it might be. It might be that you hid the key under the mat, whatever it is. So you see at once that in order to understand language, you have to have some pre-existing knowledge. So what we've done is focused on building a core critical mass of knowledge that is machine processable. We curate it from our own minds, the best minds that are out there. And we found a way to create a structure in the computer. So we use not how the brain does things, but how the computer does things. And the computer already is pretty good about the reasoning process, logic, pattern matching, memory utilization. It already does those things as well or better than you are. So it's already got intelligence in that sense. So it's been just, even though we've have a small staff, we've been able to go from success to success.
Well, Bryant, what I
nutshell.
like that you've explained sometimes, the thing that keeps this cognitive core compact is that you actually discerned a kind of periodic table underlying knowledge. So you don't have to input every little single thing on the planet. You kind of input this this system that organizes knowledge. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, very much so. So if we looked into, I said, we look into our minds and we see that complex ideas are made of simpler ideas. So the conjecture was, well, if you take these complex ideas and break them into smaller ideas, then those into smaller ideas, and those into smaller ideas, eventually you get to something that you can't think of any smaller ideas. You've reached a fundamental limit, a fundamental idea that They can't be broken down any further. And so, if you will, those are the elements of thought, or the elements that make up all of our ideas, the atoms of ideas. Now, the next thing, and Bill, you might want to jump in on this, if you will, is the idea that you would classify these, and then the different classifications of these building block ideas have their own connection properties. Like Bill calls them dangling bonds, which tells you which ones will connect to which other ones.
Yeah. My model for that, of course, is from the table of elements. Okay, that basically describes how the atoms will bond each other to form basically all of the material that in the known universe. Okay. And so they do this with specific bonding structures that gave inspiration to the ideas that you not only have these atoms of thought, if you will, but atoms combined to form molecules of knowledge, if you will. Okay. And they do this in a very natural self-assembly manner if you have everything categorized correctly, which I think Bryant has achieved with his cognitive core, with his layers of lamina and the elements in the columns, very much like the atomic table of elements. And what's interesting about this is that before knowledge of how these atoms arrange themselves in a very logical fashion, you had alchemy. You had people trying to put stuff together to see what would happen, and people were trying to turn lead into gold and other kind of things. And so it was basically back then magic until they got the knowledge of how they actually come together and chemistry was formed and theory of materials and whatnot. The same way now what New Sapiens has done, a science behind how ideas come together in a structure that basically gives you the comprehension of the language input, a very powerful concept.
We sometimes call what we do here cognitive chemistry. Mm-hmm. And that's a very powerful analogy. And so, I think Bill, as a physicist, relates to that very well. So our matrix is not really periodic, but it has some it does have sort of columns and then in right angles to that, if you will, some other classifications like layers. And that's really where it gets interesting, because the columns are kind of like the type of idea, for instance, the difference between a quality or a quantity or time and space or a relationship or an action or a result, or the things that have properties, like the things that exist out there in the world. But the other dimensionality gets real interesting. We have about 14 different layers, and they break down into 4 major ones. And those are, first, the things that exist, whether we think about them or not, the things that are out there in the world, reality, if you will. And then a layer above that, we have those things interact with our perceptions to create our perceptual world. So all these things that are perceptions. And then above that, we have the layer which is how we, as sentient beings, feel about those perceptions. Because as we're perceiving the world around us, we react to it subjectively. And then finally...
So Bryant, go ahead.
Well, finally, there is the notion of the intellect on top of all our ideas, which are models of the world about all the other things that we see and experience and think that are out there. So that's where it's that characteristic of this model, why it turns out to be inherently resistant to bias.
Yep.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. I think, for me, it took me many explanations before I finally got this. But I think, the important thing about it, I think it was the stroke of genius of the understanding that there is this structure to knowledge similar to the periodic table of matter, which I think harkens back to your education at St. John's. I think this answers the question of how did you figure this out when nobody else did? It's because your first great interest was the study of knowledge. and you know, you have a guy who puts together this deep interest in knowledge, and then this interest in AI and the science part of it. That's why I think, you know, you are the one who figured this out, as opposed to the big tech guys who are going all in one direction. But I wanted to go in a little bit of a different direction here. Bill, I wanted to ask you, you know, you were involved in AI early on. And I was wondering, I mean, just as it was kind of heating up and getting started, and you wound up at New Sapiens, can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with New Sapiens, why you became such a big supporter? Because I know you are everything. You were a cheerleader, you were investor, you were a board member, you were just, you know, you just are so all in.
Sure, absolutely. As you said, I was at DARPA. I was there in the mid-'80s, 1985 to 1990. And I was in the office of basically technology. I was managing the microelectronics technology program. But in the same office was a team who was responsible for AI research programs. And I got to know them. I was intrigued. That's my first introduction, really, to AI. And I was enthralled with the promise of AI then. But then I left DARPA, I went back to NSA, and somewhere along the line, it struck me that despite all the promises and the hype of what AI said it would do, I still could not tell my computer what I wanted it to do for me and have it understand what I wanted and go off and do it. And so there was this big gap between promise, expectation, and the reality. Some years later then, we think about 2010, a mutual friend introduced Bryant and me. And Bryant told me what his vision was. And in my gut, I knew immediately I was talking to the person who was going to make it happen. I just knew it. Okay. At that time, he was not prepared to do demos or anything like that. It was ideas, programs. So I basically said, come back when you have something to show me. And he did. Years later, not too many, a couple years later, he showed up, and with his computer, he told me what he was doing, gave a bit of a demo, okay, but I kind of already knew what he was doing. I was captivated by it, and again, I was certain he was going to be the person who made this happen for the world. So before he left with the promise for me actually become his first investor. And you're right, I have been his cheerleader ever since. It's been an exciting ride to see how all this has developed over time. And I just feel basically honored and privileged to be part of this whole thing. Because in the end, what's going to happen is New Sapiens is going to grow, okay? It's going to attract investors. It's going to build the staff. It is going to become a major operation that's going to actually make lots of money for lots of people. I am not in it for the money, okay? I'm in it for the idea because it's so beneficial to the world and what's going to offer to humanity. But also, I missed out on the Apple, the Microsoft, all those things, the Google. I missed out on all those. Okay.
Here's your shot. Huh?
Here's my shot. I'm going to sit around sometime in the retirement home talking to my fellow retirees about how, yeah, I was part of New Sapiens. And everyone's going to know what I was talking about.
Well, it's funny. I had that same gut feeling. It's interesting to hear you say that. But you're kind of going where I wanted to go next.
Okay.
You know, this technology, I mean, obviously a technology that truly can comprehend, that has language, that has common sense reasoning, the more it gets developed out, it's going to have an almost, well, an absolutely unlimited number of applications.
Mm-hmm.
But now a first product is going to be just the companion Sapiens, which could be out on the market not that long of a time. And I'm guessing that is going to become soon as ubiquitous as our smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a smartphone, that changed me. Suddenly, any question I had, I just look it up on my smartphone. I Google it. It's just boom. Anybody I want to get hold of, boom. It really changed me. So I'm wondering if Bryant, Bill, either both of you can talk about how just this one simple application is going to not just assist us, but change us. Maybe first tell a little bit about what it does and the implications.
So, Bill, I'll take the first shot. What will the Sapiens Companion mean to you personally? And then I'll throw it over to you to talk about what's going to happen when the Sapiens start talking to each other.
Okay.
So the Companion Sapien is going to be endowed with this model of the world. And we talked about our small number of fundamental ideas. And there's, there's 102 material elements. There's not much more of that of our atoms of thought. But on top of that, we've built up the ideas that it needs to basically everyday common sense world that we live in. What do you have to know about that? And so we've built up a model consisting of about 3,000 ideas, of course, with the vocabulary words to match, and the words just, of course, are finders into that model, which is itself very highly integrated. So it goes around, starts out with a world of an internal model of the world, roughly comparable to the scope of knowledge about the everyday world that a child would have about the time they've learned language and learned to read and are ready to learn all about the rest of the world through their formal education. Now, at that point, we think we already have a product because since it understands language, you can tell it things that you want it to remember for you. And at my age, there are a whole lot of things I'd like it to remember for me. In fact, that's how I know that the initial product is ready for release to the public, is when I am using it every day to keep track of everything that and so today I spend a lot of time looking for stuff.
Yep.
Where did I put that?
Yep.
A lot of time. So it'll start as kind of an auxiliary memory from the get-go. But it won't stop there. And as Lynn said, that's not that far away. We have an exciting new funding option I might mention later. I think we're going to be really accelerating and get to that problem, that capability pretty soon. In fact, we're very focused in our development on what we call reaching the tipping point. And at that point, we'll put a Sapiens on our website, and anybody will be able to go talk to it and see that it understands what they're saying, that they can basically talk to anything they want within the scope of the fact that it's more like talking to a young person, or maybe it's like talking to a person, an adult with English as a second language. But within that, anybody will see. Now, not too long after that, the next development after that, again, is to make sure that anything you tell it, whether it's a grocery list or who I last said, what did I do on this date? Where was I a year ago? Any of those things, it'll be able to handle beautifully. So it becomes kind of a outboard memory. And a lot of people can use that, but that's just the beginning, because we're going to continue to add what we call role models, which are kind of, think of the companion as kind of like the iPhone App Store, but the apps that you can download are little packages of knowledge and maybe even logic to go with that knowledge, so that your sapiens, we call them, will have that knowledge to share with you and help you utilize anytime you want, any kind of expertise. So pretty soon it's going to start. In fact, we envision, our vision for it is that your sapiens, you'll name it, you'll personalize it, we'll give it its own email address. its own phone number, and you won't even have to give out yours anymore. You give your sapiens out, and so it will be your buffer, just like a human full-time 24/7 secretary would take care of your correspondence, your email, your social media, your photographs, your electronic files, anything like that. It'll be your librarian. Later on, it'll control your smart house, your devices, and it just keeps going.
Well, what I like is the idea that this will start to replace social media as we know it, only it will be ad free, it will be algorithm free, so it won't be manipulating us in any direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, that really,
right?
But that really comes from when they start communicating. Bill, you wanna
Sure.
kick that up?
Yeah, but I would like to add another application for the companion sapiens, which is allowing the elderly to stay in their homes and live independently longer, because the companion truly will become that, with people talking to it about what they're doing, how they're feeling. And so the sapiens will learn the rhythm of the person and be able to determine if there's something wrong, something is, the rhythm isn't right suddenly, something's happened, and be able to place a phone call to a relative, a family member, or to emergency care, or even 911. For example, if the person, it says good morning and there's no response, it will, basically then go into an alert mode and summon help. So that's just another aspect I'm particularly interested in. And I'm aware, because we had a potential Chinese investor basically say that capability alone would make it a best-selling product in China. Now, I live with someone who spends a lot of time on the phone with travel agencies, because we travel the world a lot. And she can spend hours on the phone with these people. And particularly with COVID, with people leaving sick and new people coming on board, it's a very frustrating experience, because we're juggling a lot of trips. And I can see the real advantage, ubiquitous spread happening when the sapiens start talking to one another, where the travel company has its sapiens that Mary Jo's sapiens now is going to call. She will tell her sapiens, make this arrangement, make this flight, do whatever. And her sapiens will basically call the travel agency sapiens, and together they will be able to make that whole thing happen within microseconds. I'll give it seconds, okay, where it took her days and maybe weeks to do, with back and forth between companies, have to go into their files and whatnot. Now think about it when you're trying to make an appointment with your doctor or whatever, a restaurant. Tell the sapiens, do this for you. It will call the other sapiens and make it happen for you. This will be such a huge leap forward in terms of, time utilization, reduction of stress and frustration, which I think will be a big boost. Now, I see the next big movement forward, and Bryant, you just feel free to come in and interject with maybe some in-between product here. But as we mentioned, there's a lot of other capability being developed. Neural networks are great for, vision recognition and whatnot. And the new sapiens has a cognitive core, okay, which is probably the only thing on the planet today in the whole world of AI that is ideal to interface with visual input coming from, say, a neural network, in terms of creating an artificial visual cortex, if you will, that will give the sapiens vision, sight, and understand what it's seeing. Because just like us, when we look around the room, the environment, our brain is making sense real time of what we're seeing. We don't even have to think about it. It's there. It'll be the same with the sapiens, because the neural network will go directly into those inputs that Bryant talked about, which are inputs into the basic ideas of the concepts in the cognitive core, and
Bill,
create that. So
you're heading into the robotics domain, which
I
is
am.
probably the most, really world changing thing that's
Yep.
happening. But before you do that, I wanted to go back and just reiterate something about communicating sapiens. So again, when sapiens have proliferated, when you have one, everyone has one on their phone, and all the businesses that are offering goods and services have their own sapiens, which knows all about their products. So if you want to buy something, or you need goods or a service or anything, you just tell your sapiens.
Yes, right.
But over time, of course, your sapiens knows all your personal wants, needs, and desires, and your tastes, and all that stuff anyway. So you say, I want an X. Your sapiens will go out there, communicate with all the other sapiens in the world, and they will find it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is like a pitch or an advertisement that the vendor has put together to inform you about its product, when you're ready, your sapiens will say, "Yeah, I got this queued up, Bill. You want to look at it?" So what does that mean? That means advertising, as we know it, will become a thing of the past. And that is such a win-win for both the consumers and the businesses providing goods and services. No more wasting all that money buying ads, and no more ads pushed at you when you're not interested and at the wrong time. It's a win-win, total win-win for everybody except the big tech companies that make most of the revenues on selling advertising space. But they will adapt. They have plenty of resources for that. But as Lynn was pointing out, there'll be no need for those pernicious algorithms, which are really designed to attract you to your devices and addict you to spend more time on your devices because they want you to see the ads. Gone. No more increases in teenage suicide. And those algorithms, and they're all about statistics. Those statistical algorithms are directly, as Lynn mentioned, the social dilemma thing. They're driving teenage depression, device addiction, a rise in suicide, and maybe most pernicious, this rising wave of partisanship, as they feed things to you, both that they know that you are going to, if they can upset you, you're more likely to spend more time reading what they're pushing at you, anything, more ad revenue. The designers didn't intend that, but that's the effect of these things. So that fact alone of communicating sapiens is going to be, changing to our society.
Again, that relates to the whole bias-free aspect of this technology. And, what I'm hearing you talk about is that there's so much about the New Sapiens technology that is about creating efficiency. It's a very compact little technology. It creates a lot of efficiency of just the user's time and energy. But, fast forwarding a little bit, this technology, as Bill was getting into, is starting to touch upon the dreaded robot that can see and, literally Robbie the robot, who and can do anything but have a human agenda. This technology will have the capacity to basically take over virtually any job a human does not really want to do, correct? So human energy becomes what? What do we do with ourselves?
Yeah. Well,
how might that look?
Well, let me go back a little bit to what we're talking about with the robots, because there's a couple of enabling capabilities that New Sapiens has that none of the other approaches do. If you look at all the other approaches out there that are big data approaches, what they need is big data. They need to be able to be connected to vast sources of data to operate. Now, the New Sapiens is very efficient, as you said. This number of lines of code, maybe in the millions, as opposed to the hundreds of millions or billions of other approaches. It will be able to be implemented on a single integrated special purpose chip. Okay.
How
That
many
is,
how many lines of code did you say, Bill?
I said millions, but you may
Try thousands.
thousands. Thank you. Thank you. Which is even more incredibly
That
impressive, by the way. That means that you can implement this on a special purpose integrated circuit chip. That's probably as big as your fingernail, which means it can be used for robot brains or brains in anything, in appliances. It can be implanted in your computer, okay, to finally be able to tell your computer what you want it to do and have it do it. So that is, in New Sapiens, it's the only approach that allows you to do that, is able to integrate the whole, if you will, cognitive core in one integrated circuit. It becomes the brains of robots. And this is true science fiction stuff. You know,
And now, why is it not going to become HAL 9000 and, have a mind of its own? Talk about that a little bit.
Well,
You want me to take that one, Bill?
I'm going to let you take that one. I'm getting too wrapped up in the technology.
Well, you're a physicist. It comes out naturally. But it comes out, well, there's basically two reasons, both very important. One is, as Lynn and Bill both pointed out, it's very compact. It's not done with the bottom line of AI, what's so-called AI today, which is machine learning, which is based on statistical algorithms. And there's a big complicated algorithms. They find patterns in data. Nobody really knows how they work. If you could ever push them up the scale to that they actually show something like real intelligence, which they haven't yet, they solve some interesting problems, you wouldn't be able to trust it. The very notion of the kind of programming they do, they're statistical, they're what the word stochastic, if you've heard that. You can't guarantee that you will ever get the same results from the same methods. Mm-hmm. Our code isn't like that, and it's very carefully written so that in that program, it doesn't matter how smart we make these things and how much knowledge they have, even if they get smarter and more knowledgeable than we are, they're not going to change themselves into killer machines because they're not going to want to, because we programmed them not to want to do that. Okay, so they are very comfortable being what they are. They don't have they won't have the innate desire that humans have to arbitrarily change things up. Humans want to make a difference. We want to go out there and do things. Our robots are going to be programmed. Our robots, our sapiens, and the robots to follow from them are going to be programmed with one overriding value, which is to be of service to people. Now, the other reason, and they say, well, how do we know that people aren't going to, as the sapiens are taking on them and looking at them, how do we know that they're not going to be able to manipulate the robots into doing bad things? Well, I'd have to say that any powerful tool is possible to use for, as far as it serves humans. It's possibly possible for humans to use it for ill. But we think this technology is immensely inherently hard to do that with, and the reason goes back to that basic structure. First of all the knowledge that it starts off with was carefully curated from human minds. And we're going to curate the best knowledge from the best minds. But really, it goes back to that. I was talking about that internal structure at the very root of the sapiens' minds. It understands intuitively, basically, in core programming, the difference with things that exist by themselves, between perceptions, between feelings, and ideas. And so it recognizes that certain things are feelings, and among ideas, it can recognize the difference between a judgment or a guess or a hypothesis or rigorously verified information from known authorities. It has all that built into it. So if I go out there and say, right today, if I said a canary is a cute little yellow bird, and the sapiens didn't know what a canary was before I told it that, and I came back and say, what is a canary? It'll say, they are little yellow birds. You think they're cute. Why? Because the concept of cute is modeled in that fourth level of subjective experiences. So it can't be a property of birds. And so all the things that we see going on which we see bias. I don't know if you remember a year or two ago, Microsoft put their chatbot Tay on the internet, let people talk to it. Within one day, they had to take it back because people were saying all kinds of ugly, nasty things to it and about other people, and it was just picking it up and absorbing it all and giving it back to people because it couldn't make any. It had no knowledge. It was a parrot. And so if you went out there and said nasty things to a parrot, it's going to repeat them back with no understanding and offend a lot of people and do harm. So that's what is going on out there. But a sapient isn't going to do that. If you said something nasty about somebody and somebody comes back and asks a sapiens about that same person, it might say, well, this is what I know about them. Oh, by the way, so-and-so thinks they're this, that, or the other. So it won't pick up human biases and prejudices. You go through life as though you had this objective, even-handed, logical, Mr. Spock-like character helping you through life. And that alone is eminently worthwhile.
Oh, absolutely. You want me to return back to the visual aspect?
Let's go back to robots. What are they going to do? Lynn said they're going to do everything people don't want to do.
Okay. I would like to actually transition to robots from what it can also do for humans first, but having the sapients be able to see, which is pretty powerful. Okay. I am still teased today by a colleague of mine, Ray Winton, who you know, all right, about what he calls the Bandy glasses, which again, this is just a comical concept, idea from my DARPA days about the glasses you wear that project alternative realities in front of you, which of course is an idea that people are marketing today. Okay, so it's not uniquely mine, but it is something that with the sapience that has vision, you can have the vision from glasses you put on, and it has a camera. It's seeing the world, okay, and it's giving the blind input about what the sapience is seeing. You have just enabled blind people to live independently, because you first thing the blind person does in the morning, wake up, put the glasses, look down, and the sapience is saying your right slipper is to the right, and gives it guidance through the day, and then you can guide it out. It knows that you're going to be seeing a doctor. It tells you where the shirts are in the rack that you want to put on, okay? And it then tells you how to get out to your self-driving car. You get in, your sapience is talking to the sapience of the self-driving car, and it takes you to the doctor's office. This is a huge boost to the blind, which is how, I don't know why, it's sort of a pet idea of mine.
But think, Bill, go build on that. Now, think about it from the people who are sighted. We go through life, all this information comes in, we pay attention to some of it, other stuff we forget, and all of it, so much of it, we forget. But what if we all had sapiens looking out at the world, seeing what we see, hearing what we hear, and you're going through life with this entity, your own sapien, who's dedicated to your personal welfare, advising you, coaching you, finding out, solving problems for you, doing all the tedium of work, and remembering everything perfectly.
And where things are.
Where things are. But what you saw, see, right now on day one, you're going to have to tell it. I'm doing this. I'm taking my metformin. I'm doing this. I'm writing a letter to Anjo. All those very useful things. But the day will come when sapiens can see. You won't have to tell anything.
That's right.
You won't have to tell us. It's completely transparent to you. And if that isn't life-changing, I don't know what is. And consider this. All the way through life, we envision that maybe you'll give your child its own sapien when they're very young, and maybe it'll be, in a toy, its own personal pet, look like whatever they want it to look like, a fuzzy animal. But then it grows and inhabits different forms and becomes not so much a playmate, but a tutor, a guardian, a companion, a friend, a colleague, and eventually in old age, a caregiver.
Mhm.
By the way, it's going to be much more than just keeping old people company. I did want to make a point when we were talking about how important it will be for the elderly, and you mentioned that you would let them stay in their house longer. But and of course, for people who find themselves alone, old people, a companion that's been there all their life will make all the difference. And even if they get it late in life, someone to talk to tell about their youth, and companions will be, will actually make sure that they ask those kind of questions. But more importantly, we're not designing them to replace humans. We're designing them to help people and humans find and we to realize all the important necessities of a healthy, happy life. So we're going to program the sapiens to facilitate human contact and human interaction, not to replace human action, but to facilitate it.
Now, that leads into the robotic brain. Okay, now because now you're able to have robots that are truly responsive to human requirements. Now, talk about elderly care. Now you have because today, of course, a big issue is getting good quality care for the elderly. And the Sapiens robot will fill a very important niche in this whole area of caring for the elderly, again, enabling the elderly to stay in their homes longer. And so they can cook meals, they can help the elderly get into the shower, they can do whatever, okay? So that's going to be immense in terms of the benefit to growing older, having that support system there that we all worry about. But then also, you'll be able to have robots perform those functions that are dangerous, hardworking, require hard labor, um, exposure to elements that are getting more and more hazardous with climate change.
So, Bill,
yes.
What might it look like to have, since this New Sapiens technology is bias-free, what would it look like to have a completely bias-free Sapiens police force?
Bryant, I'm going to kick that one over to you.
Well, exactly. Well, first of all,
sci-fi world a little bit.
Well, it's not sci-fi if it's really going to happen. And if you already know the technology. I mean, if you don't know how, we talk about warp drives, but we don't know how to build them. But we know how to build these things. We do. We're building right now. For us, it's a straight line. So if you have a robot and it's in charge, again, they recognize the distance between people going about their business, and it's an objective study to recognize when people aren't going about their business, but they're interfering with other people via force, and even through fraudulent means. Sapiens are going to be well connected, and so they will recognize when someone is violating someone else's rights. And whether you're talking about violently or on the street or in any other way, here you have an entity that we can recognize what's going on and has no personal axe to grind itself. And it has no fear of itself. Right. It has no sense of self-preservation. Besides, it's hard to stop anyway. You can build a robot that's going to be much more robust than a human would be. And so if there's a violent altercation going on, such a robot could walk right up to the malefactor and take their gun away and bend it in half, kind of thing, without even hurting the person doing the bad deed. So absolutely, you'd want to have that, but it's no reason to think it will even stop there, because eventually we're going to be able to curate and the best of the knowledge that human beings have accumulated throughout the beginning of history and recorded in libraries and in books, and will eventually all of it will be available to sapiens. And unlike the limitation of the human mind. We only can absorb a little bit of that, right? That's why we all have specialties, because we can't absorb all the knowledge out there. We can't absorb the knowledge of being a doctor and being an artist. We kind of have to pick a narrow thing, and we can only solve hard problems one brain at a time. And we try to use more than one brain by talking and sharing and putting together teams, but communication via language is very lossy. Okay, we don't always get to convey what we're trying to say, because people have different building block ideas in their head, not the fundamental ones, they're all the same, but what they've learned about the world is not the same as what everyone else has learned. So it's hard to solve really hard problems through collaboration. We do the best we can. Sapiens, on the other hand, can transfer whole bodies of knowledge to each other perfectly. They don't have to communicate or talk via language. They just take a big block of their internal memory model, say all the knowledge of chemistry, and they can endow another sapiens with all the knowledge of chemistry they have almost instantaneously, within seconds. So they can share the knowledge, and they can kind of fuse into one mass mind, sort of, to solve problems. So the communication problem isn't there, but even more, computers being scalable the way they are, and you've talked about Moore's Law, Bill, and how we've got 1,000 times the computer process, 1,000,000 times the computer processing that we had at the dawn of AI. You can have one computer, one sapiens, that can have all the knowledge in the world at its fingertips to solve really hard problems. And the other aspect of the communications is it allows for massive decentralization. We have a person we're working with who calls himself the new economy architect, and he was working for some time using blockchain technologies and others, so that there's kind of an instant marketplace whereby any individual can offer any goods or service or any device or sale to any other individual on the planet without going through all these intermediate platforms, through a direct putting it out there and getting it again. Of course, that's what sapiens do. Sapiens will allow that kind of decentralization. So they can solve problems. You'll see they'll regulate air traffic control perfectly and seamlessly. You won't have to have humans in the loop there. And more humans in the loop, where humans create bottlenecks, or humans in the loop distort things because of special interests, that will start fading away and fading away. And so we have sapiens and sapient robots enforcing the law, but eventually we won't need to make so many laws.
Yeah, I think this idea of the sapiens corporate brain, if you will, is very powerful. We talked earlier about sapiens talking to one another, and that the sapiens eventually talk to every other sapiens on the planet. That becomes revolutionary. Now we're quite a ways from that. Okay.
But it's equivalent to, since everybody personally has a sapiens which knows their mind, which is their companion, which is speaking to it, you don't have to take polls to find what people think. The sapiens will tell you immediately what people think.
Exactly.
And who thinks it and why. If you need to do that.
And then that gets to the whole thing about manufacturing, the supply chain, which is making the news today about being broken. But when manufacturing is run by sapiens robots and the sapiens brains, and the supply chain is being delivered by driverless vehicles driven by sapiens, all under the control of a corporate brain, so you never have anything that's lacking anywhere, because the sapiens is ensuring that need is met everywhere on the planet in a timely fashion. That is transformative. That's a whole new planet we're going to be living on then.
And think again the implications for human existence. So we have robots, and they build other robots, and those robots go out and they do all the infrastructure of civilization, the mining, the manufacturing,
the building,
the agriculture, building buildings. And so what happens? The necessities of life, food, clothing, and shelter, are created without human interaction. The definition of minimal human interaction, other than you say just, I want to go build a house and I want it to look like this. But So that means that the basic necessities of life, at the very least, and probably way above that, become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because productivity is, based on cost, and you don't have to pay robots. Okay, that they become the necessities of life, the physical necessities of life. Physical necessities become virtually free. So that gives humans all the time, all the rest of the time, as Lynn alluded to earlier. What are they going to do? What are you going to do with your time if you don't have to work to earn a living?
And another aspect of that as well, it takes away any motivation for any criminal activity. Because think about it, people are
Maybe not all.
well, people engage in crime because there's need involved usually. Okay, they need something, and if you're supplying the basics to people, and allow people then to go everywhere to have an education, to really live out their passion, if you will, in their lives, and everything is basically provided by our sapience infrastructure, robotic infrastructure, you remove the whole impetus for criminal activity. And eventually then your whole need for, I'll say it, for money starts declining, okay? The sapiens will be controlling the banking system. They'll make sure people have what they need when they need it. It is basically fundamentally transformative in every aspect of human civilization. At that point, you can actually then start seeing the end of national conflict, wars, and whatnot, as people won't need to go to war to basically compete for resources. The sapiens are handling that. They're balancing the resource that are needed by people and providing the necessities. You're eliminating the need for political discourse. Maybe I'm getting way over my skis here by envisioning something that might happen 100 years from now, but I think is inevitable that this will flow forward in that kind of future.
Well, it's so much a more optimistic and positive view of the future than we've been given before. These days, fiction has become so dystopian. We have one investor who came to me and said, I had such a bad view of the future of these algorithms and taking over, and people talk about AI running amok, and where's the humanity in all of this? We're being mechanized and turned into machines ourselves. But the vision of sapiens is so bright and optimistic. I want to be part of that.
Yep.
And many of our investors are
not only I love those ideas. In fact, there's a guy who's written on this vision minus the new sapiens technology. I just feel like he ought to know about you. Jeremy Rifkin, who's a well-known economist and also kind of a futurist. One of his books was The Zero Marginal Cost Society. Really interesting book, talks much the same vision. You might need to tweet him.
Maybe.
Yeah. But I want to bring us, we've kind of gone way, way, way up there and out there. I want to bring us down to earth a little bit because I wanted to talk about another thing that really jives with my own personal values about New Sapiens, is that not only is this technology very small and efficient and sustainable, but the whole company model is about keeping things small and keeping things very considerate of the community that it's in, and the employees that are part of it, and the investors who have invested in it. Because I know, to date, you haven't, and you don't really plan to sell out to some big corporate investor who's going to gobble up the company and run with it. You've managed to just stay funded through just small you know, a network of private investors who I know as I listen to, you think of them as as family, you know, like you care about them, and now you're going to make, I guess, investing more of an option for people through crowdsourcing. I don't even know if the window for small investors is still open, but I like the whole model that you have for how to run a corporation, and that you intend to be the steward of this technology and make sure it goes out into the world in the right way. I mean, I know that about you because I know you quite well. That, you know, that this is everything, making sure of the integrity of how this goes out into the world is as important as creating it. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Bryant, your whole corporate model? And
I'd be delighted to.
I don't know, even if it's still open for investors, I don't know if it is or not.
Well, I'll just add at the end. So, but yes, I articulated it. It was obvious to me even 20 years ago, my last company, that the company that's most likely to succeed, and I mean in the business sense of, you know, we've always said, and traditionally, the only responsibility of a company was to maximize shareholder value, and that is right. But there's other constituencies that are equally important, which is the management, the employees, and in the larger sense, the community that your customers and the larger community that nurtures all of you together. You need to have a sense of responsibility to all of those things. And if you do, you'll be the most successful company. And, oh, by the way, you will return the maximum value to your shareholders. So it all leads back to the same thing. But if you focus on one exclusive of the other, you're going to run into trouble. And you might end up doing more harm than good in the world. And you're probably not going to, you know, you can grow big. And a lot of companies have grown very, very big. As we were talking today, the 5 big tech companies have gotten so big that, you know, they're shading the world. There used to be this treasured value, this treasured ideal. It started with Silicon Valley of 2 guys in the garage invent this one marvelous technology that it turns up to grow and changes an industry. And unfortunately, the 5 big tech companies all started that way, but they grew up today. They're like the forest giants, and they shade the earth, and they don't let the new little growth, you know, the new technologies grow under their shade. Well, we found a way to do that, and in spite of them. So we're kind of the David and Goliath there, but it's been a challenge, but also an opportunity. Investor Peter Thiel wrote a book called 0 to 1, which is talking about companies that actually go out and do something totally new that no one has done before. And he said that those companies today, in today's climate, dominated by the big tech companies, those companies have a hard time getting funding from the traditional means of venture capital and professional investors, so that they have to struggle. They have to be innovative and do new things. And we've always found that we'd rather go to people who are investing their money, not other people's money, but their own money, because yes, they see the value of the technology, and yes, they see that it's going to be like investing in Apple when it was just Steve Jobs and what's his name in the garage, you know, literally in the garage.
Oh, Hewlett Packard.
And you and Packard, and Packard were 2 guys literally in a garage.
Yes, literally. Okay.
Well, New Sapien started off in a boat, you know, in some ways, but you know, I know what I'm talking about. This is my pilot house, but so fortunately, there's been some changes that have come about, and that is we have some new regulations, which are crowdfunding regulations, which allow companies to raise money. FCC still has to verify that you're legit, you got real technology, all the hoops all the bells and whistles that any company has to go through to allow people to invest, but they don't have to be accredited investors anymore, and they can invest smaller amounts. Anybody can invest smaller amounts, and so I'm happy to announce that we've been accepted for crowdfunding on probably one of the best platforms out there, Start Engine, and so we within a month or so we'll be up on Start Engine. And anybody will be able to log in and see our stuff and stuff. We're not that we're going to stop all the outreach we're doing today because we're positioning ourselves to sell our products and to get the word out there that we have a new technology, a new way of programming computers that will make them thinking machines and not just data processors that they've been. We want all the world to benefit from this technology. We want all the world to know to be able to benefit from this technology. We don't want to grow up to be another 6 giant tech company. It's my philosophy that people in giant organizations, that nobody in the end, those giant organizations have they're juggernauts. They're like a giant ship, and even the captain can't turn the ship around, and they tend to run into things. So we're going to keep New Sapien small and nimble, and we're going to depend on, as we hope, individual investors. Now, I can't tell you what the offering's going to be like. I'm not allowed to, but I will tell you that the price of our share is going to go up significantly to reflect all the progress we've made. But until that happens, we're still open to anybody who wants to buy some common stock shares. So if you want to get in at the last minute on our current offering, there's still time, and we encourage you to tell your friends and people that you know. But if you wait too long, then they're going to have to go to Start Engine to invest in our shares. But that's okay, because
okay. I was going to elaborate a little bit more on what Bryant is saying about keeping it small.
Yeah.
We're going to be relying on spin-outs because by definition, New Sapiens will ramp up fast. It's extremely scalable. So we'll be hiring a lot of staff very rapidly to roll out products. But when the company gets to a certain size, the idea is to spin out a new company to go down that particular product path. And that company then might spin out other companies. So the mothership may be basically a spin-out engine of spinning out companies that will proliferate around the globe with those companies spinning out, which is exactly what you want to do to make this technology pervasive. And then there's going to be a lot of reliance on licensing the technology to other people who want to incorporate it into their products. We want this ubiquitously spread. We don't want it to get in the hands of the tech giants. We want the small companies who want to use it to be able to use it in their products. So we're going to make the licensing platform very compelling to people to use and to spread it that way. And this way, this whole idea of being able to keep the creative engine going in a small environment will be facilitated.
Yeah, we think that the optimum size for a New Sapien spin-off company may be couple hundred employees. So while Microsoft may have how many hundreds of thousands of employees, we'll have 1,000 companies of 100 employees.
Yes, exactly.
Because people in smaller organizations are focused. Our first market vertical will probably be in space, then in healthcare, and then in banking. And each one of those will be a small team of people who know those industries, who have the knowledge in their own minds that they're going to put into our products and their products and services.
Can I say just one more thing? I'm sorry. We're going to be doing the New Sapiens University. We're going to be having these classes taught in universities around the planet, how to design for New Sapiens, basically core technology. So just like semiconductor technology spread with students learning how to design integrated circuits universities, it will spread throughout the planet this way. I'm sorry, I will step down, be quiet, let you speak to them, please.
No, I know. It's easy to keep going on all night.
Yes, it is.
And I want to just have a few moments for people to share comments, ask questions. Also, Bryant, you might want to let people know, aren't you doing another kind of presentation tomorrow?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thursday
Thursday.
Thursday at 1:00. One of the things we've found it important to do is to educate people. And one of the things we educate people, of course, is there's so much stuff out there that people talk about AI, and some of it is just really, well, let me put it this way. AI, the industry has always been prone to wax and wane, and during the high periods, there's a lot of hype and even misdirection. And machine learning is going through the peak of one of those hypes right now. People are saying just crazy things, like, that these algorithms are alive and they're sentient and some of that. So we've got a ongoing educational mission that we've been reaching out to social media and doing webinars to explain the underlying not only technology, but we found it necessary that so much of it has to do with human psychology. And we're now in the midst of a 6-part series of webinars and blog articles that are talking about the interaction of AI and human psychology.
So how can people participate in those?
You just go to our any one of our websites. But the blog articles are
Make it easy.
Are on this one.
Can people just send me an email for more information?
Well, of course they can. I was going to give a couple of. See if I can do this. This is actually quite an impressive technology thing I'm doing here, because.
Are you putting some links in the chat?
Trying to.
Well, while you're doing that, anybody have any questions or comments? Anything from listeners?
Hi, Lynn. This is Marianne. Can you hear me?
Marianne, I can.
This is going to sound so parochial, but has anyone personally had a sapien themselves already? Has it been tested by one person as to how it is working?
Yeah, a bunch of people have them on their phones.
Okay.
And they're very young, they're like kind of talking to a little baby learning to talk. Bill has one. Next time you get with him, you should ask him, to show you his Sapiens and let you talk to it.
Awesome. And
they're young, they're babies, but we've seen them progress.
Awesome.
The time we've had our Sapiens.
I assume there has to be either a purchase price or a monthly fee or a service. How is this going to be sold to the public when they can have their own Sapien?
I believe go ahead.
You ask good questions.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's from an old marketing background.
It's going to be offered as what they call these software as a service. So you will basically have a subscription, a monthly fee you pay. And we envision that your own personal Sapiens that will start off, like a child. And, I sometimes say initially be like a talking Labrador retriever with a perfect memory, but eventually it'll, be able to discuss Shakespeare with you, and you'll pay about the cost of a magazine subscription, a newspaper subscription.
And so as it acquires more knowledge and you use it over a period of time, do you, again, it's going to be like your, AAA membership or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The price might change over time, but we're going to keep it very, very affordable, because it's important to do it. Besides, we have a huge market. We can afford to do that. When you look at billions of users, right? Not only every person, but every business. Right.
My compliments to all of you for explaining it to us novices. It was very clear. I took a lot of notes, but I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm so glad you could spend the time with us tonight. I'll be seeing you guys around.
Yes, you will. Anyone else?
I am Pat.
Mhm.
Was wondering, how long will it be before we actually are carrying around this device or a device and we're talking to it? And, you know, when does that, how long, what's the time frame for something like that to occur? To something that's built that you either have it's built into your phone or you have a separate device that you're walking around telling it where you left your socks and things.
Well, very good question. Bill and I have done with some help from a detailed business plan in terms of what we need to build, how much is resource going to take, what's the timeline for that, and we're looking at assuming that our through the Sword Engine platform that we bring in a stream of capital that we need, and we're very confident because it is so compact and it is small, our resources are not huge. We know how to do that, and we think we'll make progress to that tipping point when the whole world will find out that these guys over here, you know, have solved the world's, you know, the holy grail of computing, if you will, artificial general intelligence, which will boom. After that, we think money and talent will be chasing us all over the place. We think we'll do that within a year, and within 6 to 8 months after that, that first product will be released, a companion. We envisioned originally it will be an app on a phone, which will be an interface. Your actual Sapiens will be in the cloud, and you'll talk to it directly. But pretty soon, because it is compact, it'll be running on the local phone and backed up to the cloud. And always back up to the cloud because you don't want to drop your whole life overboard if it's all on a, you know, on a Sapiens. But it is that compact. So, and then as we talked out, even beyond that, we envision that we'll have like a communications device or some ways. It'll be a while before we get to Bill's glasses where your Sapien is seeing everything you're seeing. But as far as being able to talk to it, you know, maybe like a little Star Trek communicator pin on your. You can put your pin in your collar, just talk and let you know you got something. You want it to listen to what you're saying. Pretty soon, but your first Sapien, your Sapiens, I think, is less than 2 years away today.
And that will be an app on a phone.
Yes, well, it's really in the cloud, but you will communicate it via an app on the phone, and we already have that app.
That's how I'm thinking of it. Could be kind of disturbing. Is like. We already have a world where everybody's walking around talking on Bluetooth, you know, to other people. Now we're going to be walking around talking to our Sapiens, you know, and everyone will be walking around talking to computers. Like, you know, and I'm visualizing this happening.
Well, everybody's already talking to the computers, but this time, from now on, but from now on, the computers will understand what the heck you're talking about.
Right.
Exactly.
We're already talking to Siri and Alexa, you know.
But by the way, I know I was stunned the other day recently. I talked to two people, and I said, you know, he said, what do you do? I was telling him, I said, you know, Siri really doesn't understand a word. It doesn't understand language at all. It doesn't understand a word you say to it. And a couple of people said, really? I didn't know that. I have to think that they were not Siri users. I have to think that they were not Siri users, but they're buying into the hype that you're hearing out there, the way big tech and everybody else talks about what they're doing. I mean, sure, you think, I mean, you know, these big language models and people carrying on about them as though that they were, you know, that they were about to take over the world from us when they're just algorithms. They don't have a single thought in their head.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, one reason why we've had to work so hard to get the word out there. And I want to call your attention to what I put in the chat thing. 3 websites, URLs. I invite you to familiarize yourself with and spread the word. Forward to the Future, that is basically a blog site for me as Bryant Cruse, a futurist. It's called Forward to the Future with Bryant Cruse. Forwardtothefuture.com is where we post all these blog articles about AI and psychology and other futuristic things, but it's mostly been about AI lately. So please check that out. And then there's newsapiens.com, where we talk about the business and the technology, and it's more kind of more business oriented in terms of our technology. And then finally, mysapiens.com is focused on the consumer product, the companion coming. Eventually, that is where you'll go to buy one. Okay, that'll be our web store. But right now, there's some very nice dialogues on there where we compare talking to a Sapiens and what it says with the same conversational inputs as Siri does and a chatbot. And believe me, it is different as night and day.
All right, so here's a perfect example. Like I just like can't remember all the things you just told me. Like, so I'm holding my Sapiens on record up to your voice on it. Is it absorbing all this information? What that website was, what it does, what benefits it has? Like you just explained 3 websites and all kinds of information about those websites. Is my Sapiens recording that? Can I put that up, my phone up to your, voice, and it just learned all these things? And is that next time I can say, like, what were those websites that, Brian was talking about? Will it do that?
Yeah, eventually. It may take a little while before we get to that level of fluid conversation because when you talk to a child, earlier on it's going to be more like talking to a child. Okay, so you've brought a 5-year-old and set him next to you and said, watch this thing. Even the child with a perfect memory may have struggle a little bit of understanding what's going on. But that's just the beginning. And certainly even today, we'd have to structure the, right now, I don't think that we've given it the data structure for http://www. But it would,
we could know what that means, though.
Yeah. For instance, it will be able to say, check out my blog, futurist website, forwardtothefuture.com. That it will be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would it be able to just start, if you had it on record, you're recording conversations that you had all day long, is it picking up information and then later asking you questions like, what is this? Or is it figuring things out? I mean,
potentially, because yes, it will get that intelligent because it's not just recording the language, it's converting the language into knowledge.
Yep.
Okay, which is not what you said, but what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I tell my Sapien I'm taking my metformin now and then come back tomorrow or later this evening and said, did I take my metformin? It would come back and say something like this. Yes, you ingested metformin at 6:25 p.m.
But if your neighbor John Doe comes over and says, hey, Pat, I want to borrow your car. I'm taking it down the road here to get it, some groceries or whatever. Does it not remember that John Doe came over and borrowed your car?
Well, right now it's designed to remember what you tell it. It's
but
not.
What could it not picking up what other people tell it?
It's not going to.
Could it do that? Could it pick up other language of other?
It could.
It could.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We need to eventually. It's going to have to. We have to get the bandwidth of its language comprehension, and eventually it could listen to everything that you hear. And understand if it's language, if it's hearing, it could eventually it will be able to overhear a conversation you have with somebody else and come back, and you'll be able to come back and say, what were we talking about when I was talking to so-and-so? And it would remember just as though it just happened. And give the details. What was that person he reminded me of? And what was that website? And did so-and-so, when did I talk to so-and-so? Everything will be in there. And it will put 2 and 2 together. And someday it'll say something like, hey, what that guy just told you? Don't do that. That's a con.
Don't ever let John Doe borrow your car again because he didn't fill it up with gas.
Right. Last time you borrowed a car, he didn't come.
Yeah.
Don't do this again. Haven't you learned when this guy always does that? Now, a few years down the road. And we're going to make rapid progress. So don't expect your Sapiens to do that on day one, but do expect that that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. There's no limit to this technology along those lines.
And really, once there's one product out, like your Chinese investor was saying, oh, this one simple thing would be useful to a mega market in China. once there's one product out, there's going to be such an exponentially fast build out of more sophisticated applications. It's going to spiral. But I think I know we're getting late. We've kind of gone a little bit past our time. So I think this might be a good way to call it a wrap. And I just want to so thank Bill and Bryant for sharing your time tonight and all of your expertise. And thank you all for joining us. This will be a recording, I understand. So those of, yes, we're recording.
Yeah, it'll be posted
Yeah.
with some editing on our website.
Yeah. I believe those of you who are on my mailing list, I'm intending to, assuming it's accessible, to send it out to my whole mailing list. So you'll get it in that format. So if there's anyone you want to share it with, you can pass it along that way.
Great. Let me make one final plea. In any of our websites, mysapiens.com, any of these three websites, if you go to them, you'll see at the bottom of every page, please join our community. And that will take you to a page which explains what we're about in our community. Please join it. Join us in that community, whether you're an investor or would like to be or not, and be one of our supporters, our followers, and help us get the word out to everyone that this huge thing is happening. And it's going to be world changing. And you can sign up there for our newsletters and our websites and our webinars and all that good stuff. In fact, Bill is putting up that page right there. So in fact, that is at the bottom of that page. If I could smart enough to paste that in. You can just go right to it.
Brian,
And,
why don't you leave the meeting open for a few minutes after you leave so that people can capture the links
sure.
if they would like.
I will do that.
And with that, I'll call it a good night. Thank you all. It's been just a lovely evening.
Well, it's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Very nice job. Thanks.
Thank you.